All right, in March, well, so-called experts told us, didn't they, that Australia needed to brace for up to 150,000 deaths from this pandemic, and a warning that our hospitals will not be able to cope with the influx. Well, 10 weeks later, the tally sits at 103 lives lost. It was, of course, all based on modelling from so-called health experts here and overseas. Joining me now is my panel, Sky News host of Across Australia, Peta Credlin. He's coming to us from Brisbane, and Sky News host and 2GB radio broadcaster Chris Smith in Sydney. Well, we saw this, gentlemen, with JobKeeper, the bungling in the numbers last week. We saw this with all these predictions of doom and gloom in March. Now, we are lucky. We've worked really hard to be where we are. Other, particularly, places like London and New York are not in the same position we are. But Chris Smith, doesn't this just highlight how wary we need to be in taking modelling as gospel?
Yeah, and what modelling should we have taken notice of the most? Like, not only did they get the active cases wrong, they were sort of saying, oh, there could be 1 million Australians with COVID-19, maybe more, 150,000 deaths. They also got the time and the length of time that we would have to control this wrong as well. We heard the Prime Minister say, we've got to handle this for 6 months. And then he put in place measures to allegedly bridge us onto the economy reopening that were also based on the modelling. This was based on the fact that we would have to be out and about maybe 6 months after this pandemic started. That wasn't the case at all. It's been about 3.5 months, and that's been all. So we've overreached in all ways. Where was the modelling based on Australians doing the right thing, self-isolating and physical distancing? Where was that modelling? Did they look at that at all? Because despite the fact that they were saying, oh, we could be on an Italian trajectory, we are a first world country. That was never going to be the case.
I'm also, parlaying this into issues like climate change. I've never seen a budget forecast that lands where it's supposed to land. I think it's accounting astrology, if I can be kind to Treasury, and they've proven me right last week. But I mean, even things like climate change, one of the things that's really worried me, Gleeso, is we rely on modelling for climate change and these predictions of doom and gloom. We've seen 30 years of it. This is supposed to have happened and that's supposed to have happened. None of it's come true, yet we are literally spending hundreds of billions of dollars based on this so-called expert advice.
Maybe they were working out of the same building as the news poll people before May 18 last year. I mean, it seems as though the modelling sort of followed the same trajectory as some of the pollsters before the last federal poll. Look, I remember having lunch with the Brisbane Lord Mayor probably late February, and he had very similar modelling as to what you've just mentioned. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I think one of the things that Australians have shown over the last 3 months or so is that we really have got fair income about flattening the curve. We've adhered to those social distancing principles, the protocols that were put in place. We've followed exactly what we've been asked to do. And I think some of the inconsistencies that we're seeing right now, Peter, with messaging around borders in particular, that's why people are so peeved at the moment with what's going on here in Queensland, because we did the right thing. We followed the protocols, we flattened the curve, and now we've got premiers who are flattening our economies. And I think that's the reason that, we're in this situation at the moment where so many people are angry with what's going on.
Yeah, well, you won't take Victorians or New South Welshmen or anyone into your border, but of course there's a whole lot of universities and Lord Mayors out there saying, let's bring in the foreign students. I mean, they literally, before the borders domestically are open, they want the foreign students to come back. Up until now, 83,000 odd have been here every year. It's a big, big cash flow hole for the tertiary sector, Chris. I mean, do you think Australians are ready to have foreign students back in a big way in the next semester?
Well, we don't want our tertiary institutions to dive because they have become very dependent on the inflow of foreign students. So we understand all of that. However, when you've got a situation like Queensland where those dirty cockroaches from New South Wales can't even enter the border, let alone get into quarantine and go on holidays, and you've got foreign students who, it sounds like from the Education Minister in Queensland, will be invited any day now, and they go into quarantine, stay at a flash hotel in the city, no doubt, and then start their new semester at a nice Queensland tertiary education institution. Gee, I tell you what, I think the priorities might be a little bit skew with